Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I will be showing you all the different configurations that I've made to my PC, my Nvidia control panel settings, as well as the in-sim settings to improve the overall virtual flying experience in X-Plane 12. It is important to understand that not every setting and recommendation shown in this video will help improve performance in your specific setup. As a matter of fact, some of those settings may degrade performance, some of them may not have an effect whatsoever, but most of them will definitely increase performance. I sure do hope that by the end of this video that you'll be able to gain performance improvements that will help improve your flying experience in the virtual skies of X-Plane 12. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to the search bar and type game mode. We're going to click on game mode settings. We're going to make sure that the game mode is turned on. Next, click on graphics. From the graphics menu, we're going to make sure that optimizations for Windows games is turned on, as you can see here. Next, we're going to click here and we're going to make sure that hardware accelerated GPU scheduling is turned on. If you don't have any of these settings, you really don't need to worry about them and just ignore this part of the video. Next, we are going to go to the custom settings for applications. From the search bar, we're going to type X-Plane. If you can't find X-Plane in the list of applications, we're going to click on Add Desktop App. Click here, and then we're going to navigate to the X-Plane installation, which in my case is in my E drive, and I'm going to click on X-Plane 12. You're going to select xplane.exe, and you're done. Once you hit Add, you'll be able to see X-Plane listed in the application list. Next, we are going to click on X-Plane. We're going to select the Nvidia GeForce card that you have here for the GPU preference, and we're going to make sure that optimizations for windowed games is turned on. Next, we're going to type Device Manager, and from the Device Manager, we are going to disable some of the devices that we are not using. This specific step is extremely important for those of you with low to medium end machines. This will not improve the FPS, it will not improve the in-game performance, but it will release a lot of the system resources. And in my specific case, I do have a high-end machine, but disabling a lot of these unneeded devices have significantly reduced stuttering. I don't have any stuttering whatsoever in any of the games that I play on my PC, whether it's Microsoft Flight Sim or X-Plane 12 in terms of the simulators, and all the other games. I have very, very smooth experience after turning off some of these devices. Now, the philosophy here is to turn off anything that you're not using. For example, in audio and input, I have disabled my Realtek digital output because I'm not using it. And from the audio processing that is needed, from the Bluetooth, I've disabled the Intel Wireless Bluetooth device because I don't use it. Next, we are going to move to the network adapters. I am using Wi-Fi, so I have disabled my Ethernet controller. And trust me, guys, especially those with low to medium end machines, disabling those devices will release a lot of the system resources, and those will then become available for your flight simulator or game to consume. Now, the important part is really under the system devices, and this is something I recommend that you do exactly as shown here. The high definition audio controller is not something that I use, so I have disabled both of these. If you are using the high definition audio controller, by all means leave it on, but I have discovered that this actually uses a lot of resources, so turning this off has saved a lot of the system resources and RAM as well. If you move down here, you'll see you have the Microsoft Hyper-V Virtualization Infrastructure driver. Now, this is not used unless you're using Microsoft Hyper-V. I very much doubt that any gamer is going to make any use of this, so go ahead and disable this. The Microsoft Virtual Drive Enumerator is something that it is related to the virtualization environment. And this specific device causes stuttering for some reason. And turning it off really provided a much smoother experience in X-Plane 12. So by all means, turn this off. If you encounter any issues, you can always just right-click and enable the device. Again, it doesn't harm your computer and it doesn't really cause any issues. The next one, the one that you don't need, is the NDIS virtual network adapter enumerator. That's another thing that you don't really need. It is something that will be used in virtualization sessions, and this is something you definitely do not need. The remote desktop device redirector bus is another one that I highly recommend that you disable. Again, if you encounter any issues disabling these devices, you can re-enable them, but this is, again, not needed, and it will definitely release some of the resources and allow your computer to run a lot smoother. Now, just again, very quick recap. Disabling these devices is not going to improve performance in this sim, but it will release some of the system resources and make them available for your simulator to use, with the exception of the Microsoft Virtual Drive enumerator, which turning it off or disabling the device, do not uninstall it, by the way, because once you restart the computer, it will be reinstalled again. So just make sure that you disable it. If you encounter any issues, re-enable it and you're good to go. But this specific one here has helped with stuttering quite a bit. Next, we are going to be taking a look at my NVIDIA control panel settings, but first we want to make sure that we have the latest driver, the latest NVIDIA driver, which is 572.16. If you don't have an NVIDIA driver, make sure that you do have the latest driver installed always. This, incidentally, has been one of the best drivers for X-Plane 12. So if you're not on the latest NVIDIA driver, I highly recommend that you update to 572.16. Next, I'm going to show you my NVIDIA control panel settings. The first thing you want to do, we want to go to the video section. We're going to click on Adjust Video Color Settings with NVIDIA settings and make sure that the dynamic range from the Advanced tab is set to full. More than likely, this is going to be set with the first option here with the video player settings. Select with NVIDIA and select full for the dynamic range under the Advanced tab. Next, we're going to go here to the G-Sync under Display. We're going to go to the G-Sync part. Now, this is something that I have done extensive testing with in different scenarios with different configurations. And I can tell you right off the bat that if you have a monitor with a refresh rate of more than 144 Hertz, disable G-Sync. Do not use G-Sync. It is much better to turn it off, by the way, for any of your games, whether it's Microsoft Flight Sim, whether it's X-Plane or any other game. If your monitor refresh rate is more than 144 Hertz, disable G-Sync. You don't really need it, okay? Now, if your monitor is less than 144 Hertz, then I do recommend that you enable G-Sync. And there is another setting here, which is the low latency, is to turn it on. I will get to that in a minute, but just this is the general tip here for your monitor refresh rate. Anything above 144, turn it off. If you have anything less, then turn on G-Sync, because it will help a lot with the micro stuttering and ghosting as well. My monitor, by the way, is a 360 Hertz monitor, so I have disabled G-Sync. Okay. Next, we are going to move to all the way here to configure surround physics and make sure that the processor here selected is your graphics card, whatever it is. Just make sure that it is selected because the CPU, if you have CPU selected, then you will not get, you will not reap the benefits of the physics-based engine in your graphics card. So make sure that is selected there. Next, we're going to go to Manage 3D Settings. Now, from the global settings, you will notice that I have made one change here. Make sure, by the way, you hit on Restore before you make any changes, and make sure that you have all the defaults of your NVIDIA control panel loaded before doing this. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to make sure that we have the driver. Let me go up here and show you. So the first thing is we are going to come down here to the shader cache size, and we're going to make sure that we select unlimited. Make sure that you do this after every NVIDIA driver update. We're going to make sure that the shader cache size is set to unlimited. Okay. And then the next thing is we are going to set the monitor technology to fixed refresh. Once you have selected the shader cache size to be unlimited, make sure that you go to your C drive, and under C drive, go to users and then your username, and then go to app data. If you can't find app data here, you can always come here and go to view. And from the view menu, select show hidden items, and then you'll be able to see the app data folder. So from the app data folder, we're going to click that. We're going to click on local, and then we are going to search for NVIDIA. From the NVIDIA, we're going to find the GL cache here, and we're going to go ahead and right click and delete the GL cache. You need to do this every time you encounter stuttering that you cannot really explain the reason for, or when you do an NVIDIA driver update. All right, so now we're done with this, and everything else, leave it on default. Do not make any changes here on the global settings. Next, we're going to go to the program settings. From the program settings, we are going to select Explain from the menu. Again, if you can't find Explain here in the programs to customize, you can always add and then select the explain.exe from the installation folder, and it will list it there for you. Now, it is very important that you leave everything here on default with the exception of two things: low latency mode, turn that on, and power management mode, prefer maximum performance. Don't fiddle around. One more thing, threaded optimizations, turn that off for Explain. Do not fiddle around with anything else and leave everything else on the default. Now, very, very important note on the low latency mode. You need to have this on, and it will reduce latency, I can assure you that. And in my previous videos, I've had this on Ultra. The reason I had this on Ultra is because I used to use G-Sync. If you have G-Sync and V-Sync enabled from the global settings, then I highly recommend that you use Ultra, as it will do exactly the effect of on when you have G-Sync off. If you only use G-Sync, keep this on only. If you are using both G-Sync and V-Sync from the global settings, make sure that you do not turn that on in the application as well. So either turn V-Sync within your control panel and leave it off in the app, or turn it on in the app and leave it off in the global settings. But if you turn V-Sync on in your game and you have the G-Sync turned on here, make sure that this is also set on Ultra. All right. So very quickly recap on the low latency mode. If you have G-Sync enabled and V-Sync enabled from the global settings tab, make sure that you set this on Ultra. If you have G-Sync turned off or V-Sync off, then this needs to be on. To be safe, always leave this on. This really concludes everything to do with the NVIDIA control panel. Now, we're going to move to the in-sim settings. We have loaded the flight factor 777 at London Heathrow in payware scenery of London Heathrow by Time Models, as well as Orbx True Earth. Very involved scene that uses a lot of computer resources. We are getting about 41, 43 frames. I'll be showing you my settings in just a minute. Now, A very important note when you're doing the sliders of your graphics settings in the sim is that you move your mouse a little bit and see if the performance degrades as you look at a different view. You can see we're already having less frames here. And maybe if we look this way, you can notice some jittering there as well. So definitely the sim is suffering a little bit here with these settings and the high quality scenery that we're using. So I'm going to leave it at this view here. We're getting about 30 frames, 39 frames. So a little less than when we're looking straight down the runway. And that's because now we're seeing, a lot of other scenery is now coming into view, thus reducing the frames. Now, let us go to Explain 12 settings. We're going to go to the graphics here. You'll notice that I have the texture quality set at maximum. Now, this is going to be using a lot of VRAM, and unless you have a graphics card with at least 16 gigs of VRAM, you are going to have issues. The performance will be degraded. So by all means, bring this a notch down, and I will tell you how you can compensate for the loss of visual quality. Now, a lot of people ask me, Q8, how do you get your sim to look so sharp and crisp? The colors look really nice. It is all the settings I've showed you in the control panel, in the Nvidia control panel, as well as the texture quality slider. Setting this to maximum will mean that your textures will be natively displayed as they are. So if they're 4K textures, you have a 4K display, you'll be seeing them in 4K. If, however, you move this slider down, your textures will be compressed to save on VRAM. This is at the expense of visual quality. The ambient occlusion, I've set it to ultra. It will degrade performance a little bit on ultra. So if you're having issues, bring it one slider down. It will not really change the fidelity of the graphics that much. So you can, in fact, bring this all the way down to the middle here without really losing much visual quality. The rendering resolution FSR super sampling is something I do not recommend that you use. It is intended for 4K displays, but I think the implementation by Laminar is lacking. This will cause a lot of blurred textures in the cockpit and in the external view, especially when you are in the cockpit. So I don't recommend that you turn this on at all. Just use the native resolution of your monitor. The robust contrast adaptive sharpening is a new slider introduced by Laminar in the most recent versions of Explain. And essentially what it does, it sharpens the textures in the sim. Let me show you what this does. And this is going to be specifically useful for those of you who cannot have the texture quality slider on max. So let me just say done here, and I'm going to change the time. We're going to make it daylight here because I think you'll be able to see it a lot better with it during daylight. Okay, so let me go back to my settings here, and I'm going to set this all the way to maximum so you can see the difference. Now, you can see how everything is much, much sharper now. A lot of people like this effect. Personally, I think it's a little too much. I normally set it at 25, if any, but it's going to depend largely on your display. That is your monitor. If your monitor is at 1080p, you'll be able to gain significantly from setting this to maximum, especially if your texture slider is anything other than maximum, meaning that your textures are being decompressed. So this is something that will help you a lot. The RCAS was going to help you a lot with the texture quality, especially the blurred textures. So I normally don't use this. I have a 2K display here, which I use in all my videos and streams. Now, the anisotropic filtering, set this to 16. This is a very easy on performance. It doesn't really degrade performance. So you can set this up, by the way, in the NVIDIA control panel globally at 16x and reduce it here completely to 0. You will not really notice any improvement in the FPS with this at 16 or at 0 unless you have a really, really old machine. The MSAA anti-aliasing is something that will really tax your frames. And I highly recommend that you keep it at a maximum at this slider here. So at this position, don't go for 8. 4 is more than enough. And at 8 MSAA, you will notice significant degradation in performance without really much improvement in the anti-aliasing. So this is something I hope that Laminar would work on in future releases of X-Plane. But going even, by the way, to 2 times, so if you go here to 2x MSAA, you should be fine on larger monitors. So on a 4K monitor, going to 2x MSSA should be fine. This is going to really save you a significant amount of FPS. So I highly recommend it at 2x for 4K displays and 4x MSAA for 2K displays, and any other monitor. Do not go above 4 in any case, because you're just not going to get any advantage visually. Enable FXAA anti-aliasing. This is something I personally don't like. You can experiment with it, but it doesn't really, in my specific case, I haven't really seen any improvement, whether in visual quality or in FPS when this is disabled. Now, of the sliders that you see here, the 2 that are going to cause the most degradation in performance is the rendering distance and the world object density. In fact, the rendering distance is going to have the biggest effect on performance from all these sliders here. I highly recommend, even if you have a capable machine, even if you have a high-end machine, do not push these all the way to the max, especially if you intend to use lossless scaling. With these sliders moved all the way to max, there will be situations, no matter how powerful your machine is, in very involved scenery such as this one here, there will be situations, specific views that will bring your FPS down below 30. Below 30 in X-Plane, it means that you're going to experience jittering, you're going to experience stuttering, and the latency becomes very, very high. And this is something you don't need in a flight simulator. You need the lowest latency possible. So I highly recommend that you keep this on high if you have a high-end machine, and you can take the rendering distance down to medium if you are having FPS issues, and if you like to have the visual quality of the clouds at its highest. Bring this to the midpoint, and you will not really notice that much degradation in the visual fidelity of the scene. As a matter of fact, this is going to save you a lot of FPS. So bring this one down, and you can bring the world objects as well to the midpoint if you have a low to medium end machine, and you'll be able to gain a lot of FPS with these 2 sliders at the midpoint. If your machine is a little bit more capable, then definitely you can move this up here to the high settings. I wouldn't recommend going to the highest or to maximum, because again, in terms of visual fidelity, you will not really notice that much difference, but the expense in terms of performance is quite significant. The vegetation density, I've set this to maximum. Again, this is going to use VRAM, and it's going to use your CPU as well. So if you are going, if you have any performance issues, moving this down to high is actually going to help you a lot. And also enabling 3D vegetation is something that will also significantly affect performance. So the 3D trees that we see in X-Plane, which I think are done very, very well, will cause some performance hits. So moving it, disabling this, leaving this on maximum will be fine. If you're having issues, bring this a notch down if you really like the 3D vegetation. I personally do not like the 2D trees, so I leave the enable 3D vegetation on, and my machine can take it, so I push it through all the way to maximum. But this is something to look out for as well. If you are using an AMD machine, you can use the Zinc plugin bridge. Otherwise, make sure that this is ticked off. I use global traffic for non-interactive AI traffic. So I removed the draw parked aircraft. And this, by the way, will cause major performance degradation at airports. So make sure that you turn this off, even if you don't have an AI traffic program. Turn this off, as it will cause degradation in performance. This is pretty much everything that I have in terms of my settings. This is what you see here, is exactly the settings I use for all my streams and my videos for X-Plane 12. Now, one more thing that I'd like to do with you guys before we conclude this video is, if you decide that you want to use lossless scaling, which I highly recommend even for a high-end machine like this one. And by the way, lossless scaling was designed to work with low and medium-end machines. For those of you who do not have frame generation, for example, in MSFS, this is exactly what lossless scaling does, and it does it very, very well. So I'm just going to share with you my lossless scaling settings so that you can also have a complete guide for everything X-Plane related in terms of the settings and configurations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up lossless scaling. And lossless scaling is something that I use only when I'm doing flights that involve heavy scenery, such as London Heathrow, or, for example, Los Angeles International. Those really very demanding airports is when I enable lossless scaling for my streams and my videos. Works very, very well, and the latest version, version 3, is really, really very, very well done. They've addressed all the performance issues that they've had initially, such as ghosting, artifacts, and things like that. So let's close that. And now we can see we have, this is the latest version of lossless scaling, which is 2.13.2. All you need to do is select frame generation LSFG version 3, the scaling type LS1, leave the scaling mode on auto, aspect ratio, and the mode is 2x. That's what I have. Moving down here, I have the cursor, clip cursor is on, the cursor speed is off, scale cursor is on, rendering is default. This is the sync mode is default. Maximum frame rate latency is 1. I am currently not using HDR, so I have this turned off. And you can see that I have also turned off G-Sync support, as this is now turned off from my Nvidia control panel as well. Now it says it is recommended to enable G-Sync for full screen mode in the driver settings. I don't recommend it. Again, if you have more than 144 hertz monitor, keep it off. You will not really gain anything. In fact, it will probably degrade performance, if anything. So make sure you turn it off. If it is on, if you have a monitor with less than 144 hertz and you have G-Sync enabled, make sure that G-Sync support is also turned on in the lossless scaling app. Everything else I pretty much left at default here, so there is nothing really you need to worry about here. And now we can just click scale and we can go back to the sim, and we'll be able to see the FPS counter here in a minute. As you can see now, we have 41, about 80 frames, 83 frames, which is more than enough for X-Plane to get a very smooth experience. As you can see here, as I pan around the cockpit, you can see that the performance is very, very smooth. If you intend to use lossless scaling and experience input lag, make sure you go to your mouse settings. And from the mouse setting, make sure that the Enhance Pointer Precision is turned off. Well, folks, this pretty much brings us to the conclusion of the complete settings guide for X-Plane 12, the updated version for 2025. And if you have any questions, as usual, please do post them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to help you guys also with your specific setups through my Discord channel. Be sure to subscribe to my Discord as well. And I hope that you find this guide useful. Again, guys, not every recommendation and settings made or shown in this video is going to help your specific experience or your specific PC setup. But in fact, some of them may degrade performance, so you can always revert anything that you've made. But hopefully that this is a useful guide for you and that it will help improve your experience flying in the virtual skies of X-Plane 12. Until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you all very soon. Thanks for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.